This is episode 35 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and joining me on the show tonight to recap the Oilers' offseason so far is Ty Jones. Ty, thanks for doing this.
Good to be here, man.
Yeah, man, it's great to finally have you on the podcast. I know we've talked for a while on Twitter, but how's your summer just been going overall?
Oh, it's been chaos, working like crazy, and this is my last day of a 2-week vacation stint. We went camping twice. Taught 2 kids how to ride 2-wheelers.
Nice. Have you been golfing a lot? I just got out for I think the 3rd time this summer on Sunday, and it was pretty good weather over the weekend, so wanted to take advantage of that.
I golf probably more than someone with 2 kids under 6 should golf. But, yeah, I get a fair bit in. I got a membership in Cochrane here, so.
Nice. Well, yeah. I've broken 100 every round out so far, so that's a pretty good start to the season for me. I think you're a little bit of a better golfer, though. What's your lowest score so far this season?
Actually, my lowest score is my first round this year. I shot 75.
Wow. Well, I dream of breaking 80 at least once in my life, but I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. I've been golfing for over 20 years now, and anytime I can get under 90 is a really good score for me.
So yeah, the golf gods got to look down on you when you shoot good like that, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I'm guessing that you've put in a lot more time to it than I do. You really have to be like consistently out there to get good at golf.
Yeah, I've taken a pile of lessons too. It helps.
Oh, okay. And you were telling. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I used to be pretty good in high school, but
okay.
And I rebuilt it. It's okay now.
Yeah, like my dad started me golfing when I was about 11. He didn't swing a golf club for the first time until he was 25. So he wanted me to kind of have an earlier start to try and become a bit of a better golfer. And I'm still not as good as he is even to this day. So that's something that I'm aiming to beat him at least one time. And he's 65 now. So maybe as he gets older, my odds are going to increase.
Yeah, the odds will increase for sure.
And you were telling me an interesting story before the podcast. You golfed with Jordan Eberle's dad one time, or you met Jordan Eberle's dad on the golf course.
Yeah, we got paired up. Just a random pairing. Me and my father-in-law went out, and this guy and his buddy were out. We got paired up. So anyways, yeah, I was on the first tee. I'm like, this guy kind of looks familiar. We chatted away, and I have a Oilers golf towel and an Oilers head cover, and my bag is Oilers color. It's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
He goes, oh, are you an Oilers fan? Anyways, we're chatting it up, and he's telling me stories about alumni golf tournaments he went to, and some funny stories and stuff. But it kind of revolved around the Flames a little bit. And like he said, oh yeah, Giordano was there and stuff. And, oh yeah. And then I was like, so are you a Flames fan or? Well, my son played for the Oilers for 7 years. Do you know Jordan Eberle? I'm like, dude, every Canadian hockey fan knows Jordan Eberle. He's a world.
Yeah. You don't even have to be an Oilers fan to recognize that name, but it's like, yeah, I remember the guy who led the team in scoring 3 times.
Absolutely. We miss him, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, he was one of my favorite players during his time in Edmonton. It's a shame he's still not a part of this team because, you look at the kind of player they gave up, and I know getting Ryan Strome was, a useful ad, and I think the Oilers also gave up on him too quickly. Those are 2 bad trades by Peter Chiarelli, but I just think if the Oilers had a consistent 20-goal winger with this current group, they'd be even further ahead than they are now.
Oh, absolutely.
But we won't dive too far down the history of bad Oiler trades. We're going to keep it positive tonight. And, tonight we're mainly going to discuss the Oilers' off-season news. But first, I'd like to find out just a little about your own hockey background since you're a first-time guest on the show. So when did you first get interested in hockey, and how did you become a fan of the Oilers?
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. As a kid, I liked all sports. Hockey wasn't really that main thing for me. My mom was a huge Montreal Canadiens fan growing up, and then when the Calgary Flames came to town, she jumped on that bandwagon, right? And because they're close. I grew up south of Calgary, in like pretty close to Lethbridge, between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. And we always watched the playoff hockey, but didn't really watch a lot of regular season hockey in our house. And so we just cheered for whatever Canadian teams were doing well, right? And I'm a little too young for like the battle of like the real Battle of Alberta days, but yeah, I kind of became an Oilers fan by just watching a lot of hockey growing up, and I liked both teams, right? And then just the way my friendships grew with people, it ended up just drifting towards the Oilers, I guess.
But when you were in Calgary, was it tough to be an Oilers fan, especially as a kid, and or how did you manage that?
I probably didn't really pick a side until like college days. I went to college in Medicine Hat, and most of my friends were Oilers fans, and some of them were Flames fans, but they were like really. There's a weird group of them that were pretty diehard. Like it didn't matter what happened; their team was always the best. Those were the best 28 skaters in the league, right? And like, yeah, I don't know. It just, I don't even know how to explain it really, but I never lived in Calgary, so maybe it's a little easier, but living in Cochrane it's a mix. I would say it's still over half Flames fans, but there's a lot of Oilers fans in this town, especially young kids, right? Like McDavid's really, really grown the fan base, I think.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I did live in Calgary when I went to university there, so I know what it's like to be an Oilers fan in enemy territory. But I also worked at a TV station in Lloydminster one winter, and you would see tons of Oilers jerseys and shirts around town, and that is a little more in the Edmonton area. So I would expect that Lloydminster was an Oilers town, but not having really spent as much time in Alberta in my life as someone like you would probably have a better sense of where the lines are kind of drawn. Where you could say anywhere south of here are Flames fans mostly, and north of here is like Red Deer. Do you think a good mark for that?
Yeah, I think Red Deer is generally the line, the sort of the geographical line in the sand, right? But yeah, Red Deer's a pretty good target for split, I would say. But outside, the further you get in south, the further you get out of Calgary, the mix gets a lot more. And I'm not sure. I've never lived too far up north. I lived in Edson for a while. There was there was a few Flames fans, but I think most people were Oilers fans in Edson.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So once you did become a full-fledged Oilers fan, who were one or two of your favorite players?
Yeah, well, like I said, I was a little young for the glory days, I guess, but I was born in 84, so the year they won their first cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like kindergarten when they won their last cup. But I love the Messier and the Gretzky stories and stuff, and my uncle was born and raised in St. Albert, and he grew up playing with Messier, and he was a really good player himself, but he was too small. But I was told he went to some NHL camps and stuff, but he never played pro. So, but I would say my favorite is probably like Ryan Smith, because that was right around the time that I really like latched onto the Oilers, and I was like, yeah, these are my guys.
And see, I'm only 5 years younger than you, but I was born just shortly after Gretzky had been traded to the Kings, so I really have no memory of any of the glory years. I was way too young or not even alive for most of it. But Ryan Smith, by the time I started watching hockey seriously in about 96, 97, he was breaking in as the new, hotshot young player for the Oilers, scoring 39 goals in his first full season. And from there just became the face of the franchise for the next decade. So for kids my age, who were Oilers fans, that would have been, obviously their guy. But even fans a little bit older like yourself, I can see how Smith would have been your favorite player too.
It's just the heart and soul thing with him, right? Like,
yeah.
Anything to win that guy is, I love it.
He might not be the most talented player to ever put on an Oilers uniform, but I don't know if anyone ever wore the oil drop with as much pride as Ryan Smith did. I mean, playing for the Edmonton Oilers was everything to him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And I truly believe that trade caused a lot of the problems that followed. Because it was like the heart went out of the team, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there was about 20 games left in the season following the trade in February 2007, and the Oilers went something like 2-16-2, I think, in those last 20 games. Like, it was just a disastrous end, and obviously it wound up with them getting Sam Gagner as a high draft pick, who became a fan favorite in Edmonton as well. But yeah, that was a real rough end to the 06-07 season, and like you said, it kind of was the beginning of the decade of darkness.
Mm-hmm. It just seemed like, heart and pride kind of hard to find in that team after that, right?
And when I think back to the 2006 Stanley Cup run, it's just to have seen Ryan Smith lift the Stanley Cup over his head in an Edmonton Oilers jersey. Even if the Oilers do get another cup one day, and I believe they will in the Connor McDavid era, I'm always still gonna be a little disappointed, or maybe a lot disappointed actually, that I never got to see Ryan Smith lift a cup, because that guy deserved it so much, and it's just a shame that they came up one goal short in 06.
Oh, it was frustrating. I was working a turnaround in Edson, so I was working every game of that final. I don't know if I saw any of it.
Oh, really? You were just that busy, I guess. Yeah, I was writing my grade 11 final exams during a lot of that series, so it was a bit of a stressful time. You're trying to study for these tests, and it's kind of hard to focus when your team's playing in the biggest series of your life. So, but still, that series provided our generation of fans, because I think I would still consider us the same generation or close to. The best hockey memories that we've seen post Dynasty anyway.
Yeah, for sure. It was, I watched almost every game of that up to that series. And then we were in the middle of a plant turnaround, so we were busy. I remember the guy that was sitting in the control room, he didn't have a lot to do. He was just kind of monitoring for gas detection and stuff. So he would every once in a while, he'd announce over the radio the score updates, and we're like, no.
Yeah, I've got it PVR'd at home. Yeah, I've never liked when people do that at a business if you got the game recorded, but I guess they have to just do what they think's best. Okay, another thing I wanted to ask you about, especially about experiences. One of the best experiences for any hockey fan is their first NHL game. So, what do you remember about your first Oilers game at Northlands Coliseum?
So my very first hockey game was a Battle of Alberta, but it was in Calgary.
Mine too. Mine was in Edmonton, but it was also a Battle of Alberta.
Oh, it was so good. Just the atmosphere, right? Like, you could tell it was great. I can't even tell you much about the game. We were sitting so close. I think it was in 2004. And Calgary was a pretty good team. I remember them announcing, obviously Calgary was a pretty good team. They went to the Cup Finals that year. They announced over the PA that it was the biggest crowd they'd had in it's something like 10 years or something, right? They just opened the 300 section back up and they packed the bill. It was cool. It was a good game. My first game at what would it have been then? Skyreach Center, maybe, or maybe
it was still Skyreach in 2004, I think. Yeah. In
2006 was when I went to my first game in Edmonton, and I watched. It was on my birthday. My friend he's like, "Hey man, do you want to go watch a game with me?" I'm like, "Okay." And we had standing room only tickets where you had that little square.
Yeah.
That you stood on, and you had your beer and your burger on the on the railing.
Right.
And, it was Chicago, which is kind of funny because Chicago. I've seen some games where they dominated Chicago, and some where Chicago. I've been to a couple of those 9-1 games it went the other way. But
Yeah.
Oilers won 5-0, and it was awesome. It was a great like birthday game for me, and that was my very first game in Edmonton, and that was in 2006. So
That's awesome.
Start of the love of it, I think, really.
Yeah, my first Oilers game was also in 2006, April 1st exactly. I remember getting the Friday off school. My mom and dad and sister, we all drove out to Edmonton for the weekend to see the game. And the Oilers unfortunately lost 4-1 to the Flames, but I did get to see George Laraque win a fight against Chris Simon, I believe, and that was one of the most memorable games that I've ever been to. Even though they lost, just to say it was your first time in an NHL building, and I just that it didn't go the way I wanted that night, but the Oilers ended up making it to the Stanley Cup final later that year. So I still have tons of great memories from that spring. And yeah, it's just I think every, not just Oilers fan, but hockey fan in general, always kind of remembers their first game, unless you were like 4 or 5 years old. I mean, you see young kids at NHL games all the time. They probably won't remember those games, but for us being a little bit older, like in the late teens, early 20s, like you'll always remember that.
Oh yeah, my son won't remember his first game. He was about probably 4 months old or something.
Well, hey, that's cool. He got his first out of the way early. And how often do you usually go watch the Oilers play at Rogers Place now?
So I try to get at least a couple a year. My father-in-law, he's a big Oilers fan too, so we try to make like a road trip. If we can do a family thing, that's cool. If not, then me and him just have gone up for a couple. We probably get, I would say we average like 3 a year. Obviously not last year. We were at the very last, no, not the last. We were at the Vegas game, the second last one, before COVID happened. And it was like, you could feel it in the building. I think that was the game they announced the cancellation of the NBA season, or at least canceled. But you could just feel like all the like excitement. It was almost like everyone's like, should we even be here?
Yeah.
You just knew something was going to change really soon, and it was an odd feeling.
But I was there. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
We go about 3, 4, or 5 times a year, depending on what we can get to.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I try to go to about 3 or 4 a year. I mean, I'm only 5.5 hours away in Saskatoon, and I was there not too long before the season got postponed as well. It was the February 29th game against Winnipeg, and the season was canceled, postponed, whatever you want to call it, on March 12th. So yeah, just under 2 weeks before that all went down. And who knew that we were going to be waiting 4 months again to see the Oilers back on the ice for 1 week, and then another 4 months till we saw them back on the ice this past season.
Oh, it was crazy, hey? Like, it seemed like when it happened, I think everybody kind of had the thing like, this can be a rough couple months, but we'll get through it.
Honestly, when I first saw it, I thought, you know what? The NHL is going to take 2 or 3 weeks off. This thing is going to pass, and we'll be right back to playing. Little did we know, or at least I can speak for myself, how little I knew that this was going to be a pandemic that was going to last a year and a half. I mean, I couldn't have even imagined that at the time.
No, it definitely turned into something I wasn't expecting at all.
For sure. And I'm guessing the 2006 playoff run will be one of your answers to this, but just finally, what are a couple of your best memories of watching the Oilers, either on TV or live in person?
Yeah, I think on TV for sure, the 2006 run. I never made it to any. I've never seen the Oilers play in the playoffs, and I've made it I don't care how much it costs me, I'm going to one.
Yeah.
Fans are allowed back in, and the Oilers are in. Especially after like 17, I was like, oh, they'll make it every year, and then that didn't happen. So, yeah. So the 2006 run for sure on TV was one of my favorites. Like Ryan Smith getting his teeth knocked out with a Pronger clearing attempt.
Yeah.
Oh, and then he's so like that. Just you could see it lift the team. Like you can't keep that guy down, right?
I think he missed 1 or 2 shifts and was right back out there
with no teeth in his mouth. It's crazy. And yeah, I'd say like best live memories was obviously my first game at Rexall or and opening Rogers Place. We went to the first game.
Oh, did you? Where Gretzky and Messier came out for the opening ceremony?
Yeah, so
that was awesome on TV, man.
We were at, where were we? We were at a hotel pretty close.
Okay.
And we walked there, and then my mother-in-law and wife and my son came after. But me and my father-in-law, we went almost as soon as the place opened, right, which was a couple hours early. Walked around the building forever and checked it all, just soaked it all in, right? And
yeah, I remember that.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say my poor son. I think he was like just wired from all the noise, right?
Yeah.
4 months old, and he's kicking in the bed for it must have been like 2-3 in the morning by the time he settled down.
That's a day that I'm always going to remember for a couple of reasons. First of all, earlier that day, they unveiled the Wayne Gretzky refurbished statue outside of Rogers Place, and we heard the news that Gretzky was rejoining the organization after 28 years as vice president of the OEG. And just having Gretzky back, a part of the Oilers organization, I know he left just over a month ago, but to have him back and to watch him cheering during that 2017 playoff run for the Oilers was something, I'll never forget. And I'm so glad that he was back with the team where he spent his most successful years on the ice. And later that night, the Oilers, in the very first game at Rogers Place, defeat their provincial rivals 7-4. McDavid picks up 3 points, including a penalty shot goal, the first ever in that building. Just take me through that. What was the atmosphere like as McDavid was skating in on that penalty shot?
Oh, man. He was... you could just... I swear, when you watch McDavid live, you can just see when it's going to... You just know it's going in, right? You just get that feeling, and it's going in. The building was so loud. It was like a playoff game. It was cool. And I remember Patrick Maroon, I think, scored the very first goal in that building.
He did.
And that was all I cared about. I'm like, please don't let me.
I just didn't want to lose. I said, you can't lose the first game at Rogers Place to the Flames. I said, if you have to lose the rematch at the Saddle Dome 2 nights later, so be it, which the Oilers also won, thankfully. But you have to win that first game at Rogers Place, and thankfully they did.
Oh, man. Yeah, they did. They did. It was, you could just tell that the team had, there's a lot there, right? Like, that team was a good team.
It was. That was one of the best seasons in Oilers history. I think it was the 6th time that they had recorded at least 100 points in a season. So, if it wasn't for the Ducks, turning it on towards late in the season, the Oilers might have won a division title. They were, I think, 3 points behind them. And the Oilers had a great finish, too. They were something like 12-2 in the last 14 games. So, yeah, just that 16-17 season was a season to remember for sure. Well, that's awesome, man. I'm glad to hear a little about your background as a hockey fan. And let's now transition to talking about some of the biggest stories in oil country over the past month. And I think we have to start by discussing the Duncan Keith trade. So there had been rumors for a couple weeks leading up to the move that Keith had requested a trade from the Chicago Blackhawks to either the Oilers or the expansion Seattle Kraken to be closer to his son, who lives in BC. And Ken Holland finally pulled the trigger on the trade last week, sending Caleb Jones and a conditional third-round pick in 2022 to the Blackhawks in exchange for the 2-time Norris Trophy winner. Ty, the reaction from Oilers fans on Twitter regarding this trade was mostly negative, to say the least. But I want to get your thoughts on the deal. So what do you think of the Keith trade overall?
Well, I think overall his experience and pedigree is definitely something the Oilers need, right? And they lost Caleb Jones, who, regardless of potential or what people think, I feel like Holland and Tippett weren't going to really play him much anyway. So I think Keith hopefully makes the Oilers a better team. He gives the leadership or the pedigree and some leadership for sure, right? Like, this is like not just a bottom end player on a great team. He was a major part of this the Blackhawks team, right? Like I still remember him going into the penalty box and tapping Taves on the head and being like, "Come on, man!" And it turned things around, right? Like the guy, he's a key piece. He's obviously not what he was, for sure. I do think the Oilers gave up too much for him, maybe. Like, now you have a second and a third locked up that you can't use at the trade deadline. I think the idea, again, it's like Larson and Hall, right? The idea was right, but I feel like maybe there was an overpayment. Maybe he's even if he can play good second pairing minutes, now you've got 2 draft picks you can't trade at the deadline for pieces that are going to be needed, hopefully. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's something that McDavid wants. I think it's something the team needs. I think right now, did Neil win a cup with Pittsburgh? Like, or is Chiasson the only one that's won a cup on that team?
No, Neil did not win. He made it to 2 different finals with the Predators and then the Golden Knights in back-to-back years. Josh Archibald won a cup with the Penguins.
Oh, okay, maybe that's what I was thinking.
So those would be the only 2 guys, but they're, like I said, they're both bottom 6 players. So to have a guy like Keith, who was a key piece of 3 cup winners, as opposed to like still like secondary players on a cup team. I think it's a difference.
Yeah, I think that's the leadership they were hoping for, probably with like Andrew Ference and with Milan Lucic and stuff like that. But I think Keith's an upgrade in that leadership role part, right? Like, he is the real deal. I think he's a true leader. That part will help, I think. Whether it's an overpayment or not. I mean, if the Oilers go to Stanley Cup Finals, that's not an overpayment.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the whole third round pick that can turn into a second round pick if the Oilers make it to the Stanley Cup Final. And to me, you don't want to have to give away more assets than you already have to. But good if they have to give up a second round pick. That means that they made it, to the final series. That's what we're hoping for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And to get there, man, you need the guys who know how to do it, right?
Yeah. And I just first want to say, like, I think Caleb Jones is a good player. I like him as a player. I think he has the potential to have a 7 to 10 year career in this league, probably as a third pairing defender who could play second pairing minutes in a pinch. But the frustration from Oilers fans really isn't about Jones getting traded. It's that Holland wasn't able to get Stan Bowman to retain any salary in the deal. And I mean, obviously, I wish the Oilers would have been able to acquire him at only 50% instead of the full cap hit. That would give the team, an extra, say, $2.5 to $2.75 million to spend in free agency. However, I believe the Oilers are a better team right now than they were a couple weeks ago because they have Duncan Keith on the roster. And you mentioned this too. Like, he's not the player he once was, even 5 years ago. But I think he still wants to come in and prove that he has something left in the tank. And I think that he can still be an effective player, even at age 38.
Yeah, I agree. And then I heard some of the rumors about recapturing if he retires and stuff like that, which, yeah, maybe that's good. But, if he played 1 year or 2, whatever, I would have loved to see them retain some salary too. I think salary is going to be one of the biggest obstacles the Oilers are going to have to figure out. But yeah, for sure, I think I agree with you too. Caleb Jones is a good player.
He skates well. He passes the puck well. It's just, he still makes some defensive errors. And I think that last season, with it being such a short season and not a lot of room for error, Dave Tippett couldn't really keep putting him back out there. He had to ice the best possible roster that he felt could win that night. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily allow a younger player like Jones the freedom to work through these mistakes and improve. Like, they just had to have the veterans on the ice that they felt could, get them the wins that they needed to try and get into the playoffs and make a long run. Obviously, they got in, but they didn't go very far. It's just he got off to a tough start in January, and it seemed like he was fighting it a lot of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. The only maybe the little bit frustrating thing for me, and I'm not a Tippett hater or lover. Same with Holland. I'm pretty impartial. Like, I like them. I think they're good at their jobs, obviously. But one thing I get frustrated with Tippett is it seems like he's a really short leash for his young guys, and he'll let Adam Larson struggle, Jujhar Khaira struggle, right? And you're like, what are you doing, man? Like, these kids are all playing them. Like, I have more patience for, say, Evan Bouchard to make rookie mistakes compared to Larson, right? In the beginning of the season, Larson did not play that well, right? He struggled for, a solid 15 games, I would think. And then he figured it out, and he was phenomenal to finish the year.
Yeah, once he turned it around, then he was, their best all-around defenseman probably for the whole year. I mean, but, and we'll see if Larson's back too. That's another side point. But if he ends up re-signing with the Oilers, he could be a good D partner for Duncan Keith. And just to bring it back to Keith for a minute, I think he's by all accounts from what I've read about him, he's still a physical freak. I mean, he averaged over 23 minutes a game for the 16th consecutive season last year. So even if his offensive production has declined, he can still play those big minutes and kill penalties. And, while the Oilers will be counting on him to play a solid top four role, I think the intangibles that he brings to the table have value too. I mean, we just sort of alluded to it before. He's won 3 Stanley Cups. He's made it to the conference final at least 5 times. And he was a part of the leadership group in Chicago during all those years, which, like we said, it's different from a guy like Archibald or a guy like Chason, who were on Stanley Cup winners, but they were not the key cogs to those cup winning teams. Whereas Duncan Keith was right up there with Taves and Kane as the most valuable players on those championship teams. So I'm expecting him to bring a lot of that veteran experience to a team like the Oilers, who are looking to go on a deep playoff run next year. And hopefully he can also be a mentor to some of the younger defensemen on the team like Darnell Nurse, Ethan Bear, and Evan Bouchard.
Oh, I agree for sure. I mean, he won Conn Smythe, right? Didn't he?
Yep. He's got 2 Norris trophies and 1 Conn Smythe trophy. So that's a pretty strong resume.
That shows you how important he was to that team, right? Like that's immeasurable, right? And that is I've heard rumors that McDavid was asking for stuff like that, and if
that was out there that McDavid said. McDavid and Draisaitl apparently both said how hard it was to play against Keith in the bubble last summer, and that they'd love to have him on their team. So when you don't have to do everything that your leadership group asks you for, but if it's possible to make them happy by bringing in a guy like Keith, then I say that's a good move.
Yeah. If they're looking for somebody with that kind of experience, then I think you just do it, right?
And the last thing,
sometimes those are the guys that push.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just said sometimes those are the guys that push the team over the edge, right? It's just that calming, like, okay, guys, I've been here. I know how to do this. And
he might end up being more valuable to the team come playoff time even than he is in the regular season. Now, obviously, we're hoping that he's a productive player all season as well, but when that puck drops for the first game of the playoffs, that's when that's the Duncan Keith you traded for, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree, yeah.
And we also talked about that recapture that the Blackhawks would have to take on if Duncan Keith retired next summer and the Oilers would get the cap flexibility back. But the other thing I wanted to mention before we move on is that Holland also said it's very unlikely that Oscar Klefbom will be able to play this season. So when they put him on LTIR in October, that's going to free up an additional $4.1 million in cap space. So I think that makes Keith's $5.5 million cap hit a little easier to handle. And we also have to remember that this is a short-term bet. Keith is only under contract for 2 more years. It's not like he's locked up long-term. So whether you like the trade or not, I just hope Oilers fans are going to support him and cheer for him to have success here because, we look at what a tough time Adam Larson had coming into Edmonton 5 years ago. It wasn't about the player. It was the player he was traded for. And because he had that Taylor Hall situation hanging over his head, it really took him a long time to shake it. And you could argue that maybe he hasn't ever entirely been able to separate himself from that, even all these years later. So I'm just hoping that Keith is going to come in and everyone's going to be giving him a chance and not dwelling on the fact that the Oilers took on his full cap support and just hoping that he helps the team win games next season.
Yeah, that's that's where they're at, right? They have to win.
Right.
They got the two best players in the league right now. They gotta figure it out.
This is the window. I mean, Draisaitl's under contract for 4 more years. McDavid's under contract for 5 more years. You need to win a cup in those years. And I'm not saying they have to win a cup this coming season, but it's time to at least win a playoff series and hopefully a couple. Because if you start going on these deep runs to the third round of the playoffs and then eventually a Stanley Cup final, that's when you're going to really start to build that playoff experience that we want this core to have. We talked about what the Blackhawks did a decade ago. That's what we want the Oilers to ultimately become.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that seems really they're kind of a little late getting there with these stars, right?
A little bit, but they've got the foundation in place. They have the hardest thing to get, which is elite talent. Now it's just a matter of filling in the pieces around them, and I believe that Ken Holland has started to do that over the past 2 years, and he'll hopefully continue to do that this summer. All right, let's move on now to the Oilers' biggest signing of the offseason, and that was Ryan Nugent Hopkins, who inked an 8-year extension worth $41 million and a full no-movement clause earlier this month. So the new contract carries roughly a $5.1 million cap hit, down from $6 million on his previous deal, and it will keep him in Edmonton through the 2028-29 season when he's 36 years old. Ty, were you expecting the Oilers to re-sign Nuge, and what do you think of the contract?
Well, this is what kind of gives me a little hope for Larson too, right? Because there was a lot of rumblings like Nuge they can't figure it out. Nuge isn't coming back, whatever, right? But they banged it out. I think it's a great contract. I think this is probably one of the first signs of a good player taking maybe a little less money to play in Edmonton, right?
Absolutely.
And a guy who wants to start and finish his career in Edmonton. That's huge. I think these are things that are good signs for the franchise in itself, right? The term, like, who cares? We just said it. You got to win in that window of McDavid and Draisaitl's prime, right? In 6 years, I can't see 5.125 being too much for a guy like Nuge. Even if he does drop a bit and becomes a third liner or something, right? But I mean, that guy, he plays a game that I think is pretty sustainable. He's not. His game isn't built on insane speed or a super hard shot or anything like that, right? I think he's got a game that he can sustain into a little older age than a lot of players.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very smart, cerebral player. Those things will help, and he still is a good skater.
For sure.
Yeah, he's not an end-to-end blazing, puck rusher, but yeah, I don't doubt that he's going to be an effective player for a long time. And I've said this on a previous episode, but I wanted the Oilers to sign RNH before the season even started, because I knew that there would be trade rumors leading up to the deadline, and there was obviously going to be a bunch of teams interested in him if he hit the market as a free agent. So it's just awesome to hear him say how much he wanted to stay in Edmonton and build something with this group. And it's like you said, how important it was for him to stay as a part of this team and, finish his career here, because no Oiler has ever gone start to finish with the team. Kevin Lowe and Ryan Smith are the closest thing to that. They both left and came back, and they share the franchise record for most seasons as an Oiler with 15. Well, if Nuge plays out this entire contract, and it sounds like he will because he has a no movement clause, well, that'll give him 18 seasons as an Oiler. So, he's going to break the record for most seasons with the team. He'll break Kevin Lowe's record for most games with the team. And for a guy like him, who's the longest serving player on the team and has suffered through more painful seasons than anyone in that dressing room, he deserves to win a Stanley Cup as much as anyone on the team, and I hope that he gets to do that with this group.
Yeah, he's been such a good soldier, right? Like, there are a lot of guys nowadays that would hold out or want out or whatever. He's never complained.
No, and you can't even really blame it. If he wanted to leave after the decade of darkness, I don't think too many fans could even blame him for, wanting a different experience or to be on a different team. But the fact that he wants to see this thing through, and coming to the team as a first overall pick in 2011 to the worst team in the league and eventually become a champion, that says a lot about his character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing is, I get that with locking up Nuge, he took a team friendly deal. I think we can say for just over $5 million. He was making $6 million on a 7-year deal before that. And if he would have hit the open market, maybe he could have got 6.5, even pushing $7 million, because we know that teams will always overpay in free agency. So I wouldn't be surprised if he could have got more money, and he probably left something on the table. But the fact that he got that long-term security, I'm sure that means a lot to him. And it's like you said, maybe he won't be worth it in his mid-30s, but what's the salary cap going to look like 8 years from now? We know it's going to stay the same probably for the next season or two due to the pandemic. But after that, with Seattle coming into the league now and injecting some money there, and the new US TV deal, I can see the salary cap climbing and climbing. And who knows, what if it's $100 million in 8 years, and then that $5 million cap hit doesn't look so difficult to manage anyway?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, he's and no, even if it holds or just goes up a little bit, I mean, that's less than what Michael Backlund makes in Calgary.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's manageable for sure.
And we have to remember that he would have been a very difficult player to replace in this lineup. If they would have lost Nuge, they already probably need to go add at least 2 wingers this summer. And if you lose Nuge, well, now you're looking for another one. And with the lack of scoring depth on the wings as it is, it's very important that they kept Nugent. You know what? Maybe he will become the third line center down the road. That's one of the things. He has the versatility where he can play on the power play. He can penalty kill. You can put him out there in any situation and he'll be fine. You can trust him out on the ice. He could play on the wing just as easily as he can line up down the middle. So for me, it's a good signing. And if you look at his numbers, I know his even strength scoring was down a little bit this year, but he was on pace still for 25 goals and 55 points in a full 82-game season, which is right around his career average. And like I said, if he can get back to producing a little more at even strength, he should be back in that 65 to 70 point range next year.
Oh yeah, like what would he have had if they would have left that dry line together, right?
Yeah, I mean that was the best season of his career in terms of points per game average. And I'll even ask you, who would you like to see Nuge on a line with next season? Is it as obvious as saying reunite him with Draisaitl and Yamamoto?
Yeah, to me, I mean, I think Tip really made a big mistake breaking up that line, and now we're looking at them kind of feeling each other out again, trying to find that chemistry. Like you can see it's there, but it's not what it was, right? And I think
they didn't play together enough this year, right? I mean, they were together for 3 solid months in 2019-20, and I don't know even if they played more than 2 consecutive games together as a line all season. I mean, Nuge played the majority of the time with McDavid.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I believe, the main reason that they got split up in the first place, because all the best wingers were playing with Draisaitl, and I mean, it was working, so that's fine. Connor McDavid can produce with anyone, but that was during Draisaitl's Art Ross Trophy winning year when he was really thriving. I mean, Yamamoto was a point per game player for a small sample size. Nugent Hopkins was over a point per game player for a couple months, and of course, Draisaitl was leading the league in scoring. So when you have a line that's producing like that, to me, you don't touch it. You just let them keep rolling.
And I honestly think. And sure, at the beginning of the year, maybe you couldn't do that, but with Pujarvi coming up, and being on McDavid's wing, then you put the dry line back together, right?
Yeah.
And you figure out who's going to play left wing for McDavid.
Yeah.
But I don't think you touch that Draisaitl line. It's so good.
And look, maybe they will find a right winger who can play with McDavid up there as well. Although I would prefer to just give Jesse the chance to thrive in that role. And he showed so much promise late last season. You don't want to discourage him by sending him back down to the third line. He was really starting to build something there, and it's more important, in my opinion, to find the left winger to complete that line. And if you can find a true shooter to take advantage of McDavid's amazing passes, then you're going to have two really strong lines up front with McDavid, Puljujarvi, and whoever they bring in, followed by Draisaitl, Yamamoto, and Nugent Hopkins.
Yeah, because I think Puljujarvi is still. I mean, we're still seeing a boy learning how big he is, right? I mean,
yeah,
he's a big man, and he still doesn't quite know it yet. And when he starts making room for McDavid and tipping pucks in and creating chaos in front of the net or whatever he wants to do, right? I mean, he's so big. He has a good shot. He was a little snake bit, I thought. But
I mean, look, he had a rough start to the year. I think he didn't score in the first 13 games, and he finished the season with 15 goals in 55 games, which is on pace for 22 goals. So can he raise that even a little more next season and become a 25-goal scorer? You'd like to think if he's playing with Connor McDavid, even if it's all at even strength, that he would get there. And maybe if Chason isn't back, he'll eventually take that spot as the net front presence on the power play. There's all these different options that they have with the guy. And I just think that, we'd like to see the assist total go up a little bit, but the fact that he's putting the puck in the net, that's a really good sign.
Yeah. And I think if Maroon can score 20 with
27.
Why can't
even Ty Ratty, he turned Ty Ratty into a decent goal scorer. Now, a smaller sample size than Maroon, but I don't think McDavid always necessarily needs a ton of skill around him. Obviously, if he had a pure sniper with him, that would be, that'd be great. But he can, if you put guys who go hard to the net with him, they're going to still be there to bang in rebounds, or he'll bank it off your shin pad and in, because he's such a smart player. I just think, but obviously getting him, finding his left winger will be, one of the top priorities, if not the top priority for Holland this summer.
Yeah, and I think it takes a little while to get used to, to figure out how to play with him. Right? It's
not as easy as you think. Just because he's a superstar doesn't mean it's really simple to play with the guy.
Yeah, you got to expect passes when you're not expecting passes, and speed that you can't imagine, right?
Yeah. And speaking of McDavid, I think that's a good time to transition over into talking about the big month he had. Obviously, at the NHL Awards, he took home the Hart Trophy as Most Valuable Player, as well as the Ted Lindsay Award as Most Outstanding Player, as voted by the NHLPA. He joined Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, and Alex Ovechkin as the only players in NHL history to win multiple Hart Trophies at age 24 or younger. McDavid also became only the second unanimous Hart Trophy winner in NHL history, and the first since Gretzky in 1981-82. Ty, what can you say about the amazing season Connor McDavid had?
And yeah, that guy just wins when he's healthy. Hey, he's the MVP when he's healthy. He wins it every year he's healthy. It's unreal, man. 105 points in 56 games.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
I think Marchand was third, right? So he's the highest on Oiler and he's 36 points less.
Yeah.
Right? So you're looking at, that's almost, David had 40% more points than him. It's ridiculous. He's then
the third best scorer in the league. Yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah, and I think the league is really failing themselves and not promoting him more. The Oilers should be playing. They should be getting the Leafs time slot, man. They should be playing prime time games.
I wish that it was like that. I really do. Unfortunately, the fan base that Toronto has built up, and the fact that they play in our country's biggest city, I mean, that's never going to change. They're always going to be there. But you'd like to think that the league would do more to promote its biggest star.
Oh yeah, I don't know if that was real or not, but I saw like a thing on Twitter where they had the captain of the Edmonton Oilers was Andrew Ference. And
That was on ESPN. They were promoting that hockey is coming back to ESPN next season after I'm not sure how many years it's been away. I think over a decade. And they I don't know if it was some intern who did that or if they are just that inept when it comes to hockey, but they post a picture of Alex Ovechkin, probably a very recognizable name and face to even casual hockey fans in the States. And I'm sure someone Googled, get a picture of Connor McDavid, and they just grabbed the Oilers captain that popped up on images, and it was Andrew Ference of all guys. Like, it just made it look like they, number one, that they're not fact checking or not careful, and number two, that they don't really care.
Yeah, that guy is a gold mine.
Well, we all know it. If he played for the New York Rangers or the Boston Bruins or the Chicago Blackhawks, he would be the face of the NHL, and he should be. But the fact of the matter is, other than in Canada, how many sports fans in the United States are really aware of what Connor McDavid is doing on a regular basis in Edmonton? It's very similar to what was happening with Wayne Gretzky in the 80s, when he didn't really start to get as much attention as he deserved until he went to LA, even though he was having these historic offensive seasons that no one was seeing it. The difference is that fans have more access because of the internet to see what Connor McDavid is doing. The league just chooses not to promote him as well as they should. And, it's a shame because a lot of hockey fans in the States just have no idea what an incredible player this is.
Yeah, the league, they need to get out of their own way sometimes because, like, I mean, you said even the Wayne Gretzky days, right? Like, the Battle of Alberta was the best hockey that anybody could watch, and nobody watched it.
Yeah.
Unless you were from Western Canada or United States, right? Like,
yes.
It's really weird.
It is. I want to run through some of the accolades and milestones McDavid hit this year. I won't go through all of them, but I mean, he really did have a season for the ages. And just like Gretzky, it felt like when he was in his prime, it felt like every game McDavid played this season had the chance to be a history-making night.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about some of the biggest milestones, obviously, from the 2020-21 season for him. So McDavid led the league in scoring with 105 points, as you said, in just 56 games. He also hit the century mark in only 53 games to claim his third Art Ross trophy. So by doing that, he joined Gordie Howe and Wayne Gretzky as the only players in NHL history to win 3 scoring titles by age 24. He finished 21 points ahead of the runner-up, who was also his teammate Leon Draisaitl, which was the largest margin of victory in the scoring race since Gretzky won by 32 points over Brett Hull in 1991. McDavid was only the 8th player in NHL history to record 4 100-point seasons by age 24. McDavid had more assists than any other player in the league had total points other than Draisaitl. He finished second in the league in goals and reached the 30-goal mark for the 5th consecutive season. McDavid tied Sidney Crosby as the 8th fastest player in NHL history to reach 500 points. He doing so in only 369 games. And finally, he broke Mario Lemieux's NHL record for highest percentage of points on team goals in a single season with 57.38. So all in all, I would call that a season to remember for the Oilers captain. How about you?
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah. And this guy, I don't even think we've seen the best of him, Ty. I really think that his best seasons are still ahead. And when he's 25, 26, 27, the potential is there, I think, for 150 points in a season. And it sounds ridiculous. Like, we haven't seen that in over 3 decades. And I'm sure a lot of fans think we'll never see it again. But this season, he was on pace for over 100 assists and over 150 points if it would have been a full 82-game season. And I really wish we could have seen what would have happened if it was a full normal season. But he's in his absolute prime, and the best stats we're going to see from him are going to come in the next years. So let me ask you, what do you think he's capable of scoring in the NHL, whether it's next year or the year after?
Well, yeah, I think we're there, right? Like, he's got to get a little bit of help on his line, he's playing 25 minutes a night sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the guy that he's 105 points in 56 games. He's a second half player. Like he always finishes strong, right? So if that was an 82 game season, I can't see how he couldn't have got 150 points there, right?
I mean, he had more 3-point games than 0-point games this year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Ridiculous. You know how hard it is to get a 3-point game? And he did it 19 times this year, which is the most in the salary cap era by any player. And he only had a 56 pandemic shortened season to do it. Like, he might have hit 25 3-point games if it would have been a regular season.
Yeah, that's like
it's
these games were 3-point games.
Yeah, these are Gretzky and Lemieux type numbers, and who would have thought that we'd be seeing this type of scoring in 2021? It's like he's putting up 1980s numbers in the 2020s.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's impressive, right? Like,
so you're with me though. 150 points.
I would say
capable.
I can't. Yeah, he could. If they get a little bit of help on his line, who are still playing there and playing well, like, yeah, I could see 160 points there. I can't see the Oilers' power play not being near the top of the league, right?
I mean, he averaged 2 points per game for a large stretch this season. If he ends up being able to do it for the majority of a normal season, that would take him pretty close, if not over 150 points. And even if he never gets there, I do believe that he will. This coming season, I believe he will break Nikita Kucherov's high mark for points in the salary cap era of 128. I think he's going to get 130 or more points. I think I pegged it recently at 135. I predicted, just to be on the safe side, which is crazy to say that that's like a conservative guess. But
150. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no one's had 130 points since Yager and Lemieux in 96. So we're talking a quarter of the century, since before McDavid was even born. That's how long ago it's been since this happened. And I just think we are so blessed to be watching the most dominant hockey player we've seen since Lemieux. And the fact that he's in Edmonton, they have to take advantage of these next few years and really compete for a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. 100%.
And just to wrap up here, I want to quickly talk about free agency. The Oilers, like we said, obviously need to add a couple new forwards to play alongside their elite centers. Is there a player or two that you hope the Oilers will target when free agency begins on the 28th?
Well, yeah, man, it would be cool to have a Landeskog or Taylor Hall come. I know it's kind of a polarizing thing, but I mean, he wouldn't be the guy, right? Yeah, I think we need to find a left winger for McDavid. That's the biggest piece missing, right? And a goalie, I think. Great, bring Mike Smith back, but that means Koskinen can't be back, and then you can't run that tandem again, right? So I think, I don't know though. Like, what do you do? There needs to be some trades because they need to be smart with the money. So I guess it depends where it goes. Like, what can you trade for, and what are you missing after that, right? So, I mean, there's some good free agent goalies too. There's Driedger, Allmark, Grubauer. There's some good players out there. But like you said earlier, teams overpay in free agency. So, I don't know the answer, but
I'm just saying, who would you like? Like, who would be your ideal target if they could even just get one guy? If you said that's the one guy they're going to get in free agency, that's who I want.
Well, I would love to see Hall back. I know, like, some people hate it, but I think Hall's got some speed. If he could play with McDavid, that'd be amazing, right? He seems to have kind of found a good style for himself, and he's been healthy the last couple of years. I think I'd love to see Hall back.
You know, and I try to think back to the one season that they were teammates in 2015-16 before Hall was traded. And that year, I think they did start together pretty early on. And Hall and McDavid, they're both incredible skaters, which, you know, is a huge asset to have a winger who can keep up with McDavid. But I think that Hall needs to have the puck on his stick. He needs to carry the puck up the ice. So when there's only one puck, it might make more sense to actually have those two on separate lines. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't run them together, but maybe having Hall with a Draisaitl, and they did have good chemistry back in 2015-16. Maybe that's the duo that you put together and find someone else for McDavid. And I guess that would almost have to be Ryan Nugent Hopkins, unless Dylan Holloway proves that he's ready to step up and take that spot. And I'm hopeful that Holloway will eventually graduate and fill that spot as McDavid's left winger down the road. We don't know what to expect from him because he doesn't turn 20 until September, so it might be a lot to ask for a rookie to handle first pairing minutes going up against the opposition's best defenseman every night as a first year player. But Hall is someone who, I'll be honest, I would be interested to have back as well. I think that Oiler fans seem split on it. Half of them would like to have Hall back. Half of them are done with him forever. You're never going to get a consensus from everyone of what they want. But the fact of the matter is that Hall would make the Oilers better automatically. Like you watch what he was able to do with Boston late last season. As soon as he left Buffalo and went to a good team, his effectiveness just went through the roof, and he was scoring a lot more and producing a lot more. So I believe that would be a good fit if the Oilers could bring him back. And, there's always been rumblings out there that Hall wanted to come back to Edmonton and that he was, really disappointed about the trade in the first place. So maybe that will happen. I think Gabriel Landeskog would be an even better target. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many guys that I would go 7 years with in free agency or pay big dollars to. But Landeskog would be one of them, just because I think that he is such a smart player and a sturdy player and a guy who you can count on for 60, 70 points every season. It's just that's the kind of guy that you need right now. And like we talked about with Nuge, even if the last couple of years of that deal don't look great, you have to be thinking about the here and now. That's and right. As long as he is a valuable piece to this team for the next 5 years, that's what matters. Because if you win a Stanley Cup or get close to winning a Stanley Cup in the next 5 years, that probably means McDavid extends and plays another 8 years in Edmonton, and you have a chance to win more cups down the road. But you have to win right now. We have to show these guys that we're trying to put a team around them. And that's going to be the big test for Holland. We're going to see in the next couple of weeks what he's able to do. And maybe they'll even just get a guy like Brandon Saad, who's still capable of scoring 20-plus goals. If Patrick Maroon can score 27 with McDavid, I think Saad could score 30 with him. But Landeskog would still be my number one target, if anyone.
Yeah, Landeskog is a good name, too. The only reason why I was a little deterred is because of the money I've heard, right? And that's a lot of cash for him.
It is, but that would be, like I said, one of the only guys I would be comfortable giving that kind of money to. It's not, in free agency, when you give out a lot of term and a lot of money, I would say at least 50% of the time, if not more, it comes back to bite you. But if you are going to give that money to a player, give it to a player with a history of scoring. Give it to a player whose body is going to withstand the seasons and not break down like an aging power forward like a Milan Lucic, right? It's about making wise decisions, because that we've seen with James Neal too. When he first arrived in Edmonton, he had a short resurgence where he was scoring at will, and then it dried up a little bit, and he kind of had a bounce back here and there, but he's not the player he once was. And I'm not saying he's the exact type of player as Milan Lucic, but this is an example of what can happen when you sign, aging players to big money. But Landeskog is one that I would be willing to take that risk on, because I think if the goal is to try and at least get to the conference final next year, a guy like him will help you get there a lot more than some of the other names that are tossed out there, like a Zach Hyman or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, one of the beauties about Nuge is he gives you some flexibility, right? Like if you
Oh
find,
yeah,
if you do say it is Hall, right, and he won't play well with McDavid probably, so then you move Nuge up there, right?
and I'm not saying that they wouldn't play well together. I mean, you put two elite guys together, it will work. But it's
Mhm.
it's just a matter of they're both play drivers and they're both such great skaters with the puck. It almost seems like you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. It would make more sense, I think, to have McDavid on one line and a guy like Hall on another line who's not as talented as McDavid, but can do some of the same things, you know. So, and of course, they're going to still play together on the power play, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with you. I think their similar styles might make it hard for them to be line mates, but
Yeah,
if you can get them, I would love to see Hall back. But Landeskog too. I mean, you can't. I don't think you'd go wrong with either one of those guys.
for
Depending on,
sure.
obviously, right? If Hall wants 8 or 9 million, then no, obviously that.
Look, if he really wants to come back to Edmonton, though, and Ken Holland says, "Listen, Taylor, we want you back. If there's mutual interest, let's make this happen." But you know, you have to take a team-friendly deal here. You have to decide that being an Oiler to you and winning a Stanley Cup in Edmonton is more important than chasing every possible dollar that you could get. Because if you are just trying to get as much money as humanly possible, it's not going to be here. You'll find that somewhere else. But if the most important thing to you in free agency is getting a long-term deal and playing with the team where you started and trying to finish this with a championship, then we have to talk about a lower cap hit.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, I think Landeskog is your better bet to pay on, right? If you're going to pay big money.
Yeah, and he's a couple of years younger too, which helps.
Yeah, he's a big, strong goal scorer
Yeah,
guy. So, and he's
and he
elite.
can. Yeah, I mean he was the youngest captain in NHL history until McDavid came along 5 years later and broke that record. So I mean you always hear about what great guys Swedes are. I think adding him to the dressing room isn't going to hurt you at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that'd be great. I think they're well on their way. I mean, who do you target in free agency? I'm not sure because the the wish list and the reality of the money is two different things, right?
Yeah, and as much as people want to, or some, I shouldn't say all, but as much as some fans want to bash on the job that Ken Holland or Dave Tippett have done because they haven't had any playoff success so far, I just want them to remember that they've made the playoffs in back-to-back years under these two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And both years they were second place in the division. They've had, very solid regular season. It's just about finding that next level of success in the playoffs. So, yes, even though I'm disappointed that they got swept by the Jets this year as well, it doesn't take away from the fact that the Oilers are still a good hockey team. They finished 11th in the league this year. They were 12th in the league last year. They're on the verge of becoming a top 10 team. And when you have guys like McDavid and Draisaitl in their prime, you want to become a top 5 team sooner rather than later. And I think the time to do that is hopefully next season.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, I do agree that Tippett and Holland have created some stability and some whatever. Some moves you scratch your head. Some are great though. But
Yeah.
I mean, how the hell did he trade Milan Lucic, right?
Yeah, and look, I know some people are saying that, the Flames actually won that trade. You know what?
Mm-mm.
James Neal might not be the player he once was, but I will still take James Neal over Milan Lucic right now.
The reason why Neil wasn't in the lineup is because the Oilers have, I think, a better set of forwards than the Flames right now.
And also, wasn't he one of the players who had COVID early this season?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't think it ever officially came out, but that's
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, we all know what that can do to drain the body of energy and everything. So maybe there were lingering effects to that all season, aside from him, being 34 now and not the player he was when he was 24. So it's, I don't think anyone was expecting him to score 30 goals this year. It's just, but he did have a hard time staying in the lineup consistently.
Yeah, and Lucic, he does play better in Calgary. I mean, they're not a running gun like the Edmonton Oilers.
Right.
So he's definitely better off there. But regardless
it's a shame we had to give up that 3rd round pick. That was a head scratcher. You know, Neil has to score 20 goals for the trade to kick in, and he gets 19, and then the NHL says, "Oh well, you know, we'll round up." You know, if he would have, if the season wouldn't have been canceled, you know, he would have hit 20. Yeah. Have to give up the 3rd round pick for that.
Right? He was ice cold near the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually think he was going to get it.
And for the people who criticize Holland, what does he do? He ends up taking the 3rd round pick from before and trading down to get a 4th and a 5th round pick and turning that into Savoy and Tullio. Like he makes good use of these depth picks, and I know his 1st round picks have been criticized both years from some people, but Holloway is looking like he's going to be a real stud. And I mean, sure, the Oilers maybe could have taken a forward instead of Broberg. I would have been, hoping for that as well. But Broberg looks like he has the potential to be at the very, very worst a top 4 defenseman, and maybe still a top 2. We don't know. But the fact that he's such a great skater with that size and that frame, that's encouraging for the future.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And that's the biggest thing that the Oilers have been missing for a long time is making picks past the 2nd round, right?
Yeah.
So those are.
Well, they've restocked the cupboards, and I think the Oilers prospect pool right now is as strong as it's been in a long time. So it's very encouraging going forward. And you need these guys to start making their way up to the NHL and helping during the McDavid era.
Yeah. Yeah, and it needs to, the time is now, right? So I think they need to be really wise with asset management, with cap management. Just because you have a bunch of decent defensive prospects, you don't give them away. You get stuff for them, right? And play smart.
And I mean, just tying back to what we talked about at the very start, yes, giving up Caleb Jones, you don't like to see a young defenseman like that go, but they have Samorukov coming, they have Broberg coming. These are guys who are going to be pushing to play on that left side. And when you already have Darnell Nurse as your locked-in number 1 defenseman of the future, there's only so many spots there. It makes sense that those could be eventually the guys. Broberg could eventually fill in to be the 2nd pairing guy behind Draisaitl, and then Samorukov is, if he turns out to be the next coming of Adam Larson, well, then that's great too, because this is a guy who's got a big shot. He hits hard. And he had, really good plus minus in the KHL last year. He just turned 21. I think the future's bright for the Oilers blue line.
Yeah. I also think for the Oilers to win right now, we're going to lose some of those guys, right?
Yep. You can't keep everyone.
No, but don't give them away. Make good moves.
No, make good moves. Well, Ty, listen, it's been great talking to you tonight. I hope that you'll be back on the podcast again sometime. But before we go, where can people follow you on Twitter?
I am at TyJones01. I talk a lot of nonsense on there, mostly hockey.
Okay, so everyone, please go give Ty a follow. Like I said, awesome Oilers fan to talk to, and thanks so much for joining me tonight, man. Thanks
a lot. It was a good time.
So for Ty Jones, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out. Life.